The movie opens up with Jack, a middle-aged assassin in a futuristic, neon-drenched version of Hong Kong. In a world full of enough professional and personal rivalries, Jack works as a hired assassin, going around the dark and shady corners of the metropolis to finish off his targets. He leads a lonely life, and he usually pays for time with android prostitutes, but he is burdened and worn out by his life in the city. One day while traveling on the subway, he comes across a woman who he finds of attractive interest. Being someone very experienced and sneakily following people around without their knowledge, Jack goes around following this woman and reaches a club. Going in as a potential customer, he realizes that the woman is one of the many performers at the club. She sings for paying customers from behind a glass chamber, where the customers can see her, but she cannot see them. Jack specifically then requests her service, and during their session, the woman tells Jack that her name is April, and she has moved to the city in search of a living from her small native village in South Vietnam. She says there is no money there, but she likes that it's quite peaceful there. Next, April asks him his name, and Jack willingly tells her. She is easy to talk to, and Jack opened himself up to her, except that he lied to her, saying he works in construction. After the session ends, Jack continues following April around on multiple occasions. First, he stalks her as she dines in the city alone by herself, and then he follows her to her neighborhood. She lives in an apartment, and Jack takes shelter in the building next to hers. Meanwhile, Jack seems to feel an intense attraction towards her, something that is very new to his experience. Along with that, he is also going through bouts of ill health, sometimes pain in his chest, and sometimes something else, for which he is seen taking medicines, but the reason for which is unknown. The next day, while following April, he goes into narrow and empty lanes and suddenly realizes that a dark-skinned man seems to be following him throughout all the turns he has taken. This face is known to him as the man was also present in a restaurant on the first night when Jack was on a mission to kill his target. Later, Jack once again goes back to the club where April works and prepares to speak to her. As April comes out, she first thinks it's the usual customer that needs her entertainment, but somehow she recognizes Jack from their last session. She says she remembers him by his voice, and Jack asks her whether she has eaten or not. She says she hasn't, and Jack politely asks her if she would like to dine with him. April skeptically accepts his invite for dinner, and after her shift ends at midnight, she finds a strange man staring at her from across. She immediately noticed that it was Jack and approached him. Seemingly, the moment is awkward because she just knew him through his voice only, but once they sat down, things eased up a little. She starts by touching his hands and telling him the love line on his palm is short. Jack told her he so far hasn't had the best experience regarding love, because all he knows about it is sadness and despair. He told her his backstory, which lacks a perfect family essence and togetherness. They share several stories of what they like and don't like, and soon, Jack finds himself immersed in this woman. Finally, Jack hands her some money to help her out, but it's clear April wasn't proud to take it. That very night, after their date is over, while walking on the streets alone, Jack once again sees his stalker and tries to approach him, but the man carelessly walks onto the main road and is violently hit by a speeding bus. As Jack goes to check on him, he sees that the man is not a human, but a humanoid robot that has been destroyed by the accident. He picks up a memory chip from the scene of the accident and tracks it down to Masuka Corporation, a biotech company headed by scientist Dr. Bergman, who has been missing for almost a year. The next day, Jack tries to track down this scientist, while his health grows worse, and he has to consult a doctor about it. The doctor, too, is confused by his ill health despite having clean DNA. He tells him his DNA shows no signs of decay, thus he can't be helped by the doctor or with any other hospital. Shortly after coming out of the doctor's office, Jack tries to find and ask Dr. Bergman for help, but he refuses to trust him, can't help him if he can't trust him, and Jack doesn't seem to be trustworthy for the man. Though Jack continued to meet with April. They have another date, and this time April comes with her natural looks, more like her true self. This time she tells him after the first session they had in the club, she dreamed of him the same night, and when in the morning she surprisingly felt like she missed his voice, and to be honest, she never misses anyone for a long time. After this date with April, Jack confronts another man who seems to have been following him, and the stalker explains that Jack had killed his brother. He was an assassin, and the man's brother was one of his victims. He wanted to get some sort of revenge. Jack, now taking complete control of the situation, is about to shoot the man dead, and we see him pulling his gun out on him. However, before he can do so, he falters at the last minute and loses control over his own body, which eventually causes him to throw up and fall to the ground. Shortly, Jack is quickly helped back to his feet by Dr. Bergman, who had been tailing him the entire day. He takes the ailing assassin to his small apartment and checks on his vitals. Jack reveals that he has been feeling sick since around the same time that he met with April, and the scientists suggest that the two might be somehow linked. After he leaves, Dr. Bergman starts to look into this curious case, trying to read up on his old research documents on life extension, and also secretly visiting his old laboratory at Masuka. However, he also realizes that a stranger is also stalking him and trying to get into his well-guarded apartment, thus he takes out a gun and stands to protect himself by any means necessary. Meanwhile, Jack and April spend a lot of time with each other, growing closer and confiding secrets about their past. April reveals to Jack that she once had a daughter who she lost in the world, and that she regularly prays for her well-being and health wherever she goes. Jack, too, tells her about his phased past, about his mother who abandoned him at a young age, and his father with whom he does not keep in touch. Although April wants Jack to spend the night at her place, he insists on leaving, saying that it is not safe for her to be near him, but April tells him that she still views him like she did, and that she is not scared of him. Meanwhile, back at Dr. Bergman, he takes out a hidden file for a long time, and in it he discovers a sinister background to all the past experiments that have been done on people. The next day, Jack visits the last address of his father that he had and is informed that the old man had died a year ago. Jack, once completely unaffected by any of these emotions, till one point in his life, now almost breaks down after hearing of his father's demise. Dr. Bergman also visits April's club and tries to convince her to stay away from the hitman. She is confused at first, but shortly the doctor reveals to her he is talking about Jack. Then he meets with Jack at a diner and reveals that in his early childhood, the man was subject to an experimental program in which street children were taken to test trials to extend life. In it, some hormones were restricted from being produced in their bodies, which essentially made them devoid of any deep emotional feelings. Jack had been a part of this and therefore could be a cold-blooded killer, and the corporation was now sending men or humanoids to bring him in and conclude the research. However, these hormones now caused a resurgence in Jack's body, which made him feel so strangely attached to things, and also, this was causing an imbalance in his body, which was making him sick. Dr. Bergman also reveals that he was the one heading all such experiments, but is now terribly remorseful of them, and also that Jack is sure to die if his body keeps producing the hormones. For some time, Jack tries to stay away from April, still looking at her from a distance, but then ultimately gives himself in as the two spend a romantic, sensual, and truthful night together at her place. Now guys, despite the character of Jack being framed as a sourceless drifter, enough information has been provided about him. He remembers his mother and tries to very twistedly grow closer to her memory by paying for a night with an elderly sex bot, and then only sleeping with her hand over his head. He remembers his father and remembers not to meet him. He recalls the sounds and experiences of his childhood, presented in black and white by the film. But he also has this ever-growing doubt about the actuality of these memories, whether they were memories or just a dream. This fixation with what is real and what is not continues, as there is enough reason to be doubtful in the world he lives in, where fake plastic-like strawberries are served at clubs. It is perhaps Jack's gradual realization about the fabric of his life, along with his growing ability to feel. The next morning, Jack wakes up alone in the apartment, and there is no sign of April anywhere. Coming down to the street, he sees two men, one of whom was earlier seen outside Bergman's apartment, and a black van waiting to abduct him. He starts limping towards the other side of the street with the two men following him, and then suddenly sees the young man he had not been able to kill earlier, the man who wants to avenge his brother's death. The man now yields a gun and shoots at the two perpetrators. A gunfight follows, which kills all three men, but Jack remains unharmed in the middle. He limps into a corner alley and possibly passes out. With a slow fade, the scene changes to a tall skyscraper, where Jack is seen working as a construction laborer. He used to work in this profession earlier and is now seemingly back to it. He goes back to the club and asks for April, but is told that she has returned to Vietnam. Looking at the plate of fake strawberries, he walks out of the club with a disheartened spirit and walks into the crowd. Jack does survive physically, but he is lost spiritually. His growing feelings were already making his life more difficult, and now, without even his beloved April, Jack's life is nothing but hollow. In a short sequence of fleeting scenes played in slow motion, April's perspective is shown as she walks away from the apartment the previous morning. She had removed Jack's gun and thrown it away, which had rendered him defenseless and could have led to his death. She is also seen meeting with her young daughter, but by now we do not know what is real and what is fake. By the end, viewers are left with more confusion, as Jack promises to keep waiting for April in his seemingly unending expanded life.